so much for coming out. It is great seeing such a nice room of people interested in voting, because that's what we need to do. We need to put our votes out there and let the current legislature know that we are tired of their inaction. I'm Alice Demetrian, running against Ms. Janice Bowling. I'm retired law enforcement, where I work in communications and corrections. I also worked 10 years as a volunteer EMT on a rural ambulance service. Those positions put me in contact with people in crisis. I had to learn their situation, listen to their needs, formulate a plan, and then act. I feel that act is something we have not seen much of in the recent sessions. As an EMT, I also saw many people who waited until it was an emergency because they didn't have insurance or who couldn't afford their medications, so they were in crisis. I feel that healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and I would work very hard towards doing something to get Insure Tennessee back on the table. Thank you again for coming out. I believe my minute's almost up, and I'll let Mike take the mic.
Thank you, Alice. Next is Mike Winton.
Good evening. Thank you, WMSR, and thank you, Manchester Times. But most of all, thank you for being here. These are important times as our nation has been founded. It's all about you, the folks that vote. That's the reason you're here. You want to get information. Mike Winton, nothing special. Only to my mother. I don't know how she was smart enough to name me Michael after an angel. She just, I don't know, she's that way. So, but I was raised by a single mom. I grew up in Pella on my grandparents' farm, and I went to work for the public. Now, I went to work when I was about 6 or 7 years old. If you've been on the farm, you know that. But I went to work for the public when I was 12. When I went to high school, I worked at a gas station at nights. 3 nights a week, and I would get off the bus, work my shift, clean up at the garage, and go back to school on that same bus the next morning. My work ethic, I think, came from my mom because she raised 4 kids on shirt factory pay. If you folks have ever been around that kind of stuff, you know it's tough. She'd get up at 3:30 in the morning and make biscuits just to sell her extra income. Come home, take care of her children, sometimes crying because she didn't make production. Then go clean the local bank. That work ethic, I think, distilled into me that I want to pedigree my mother. I want to pedigree my ancestors. And 18 years ago, I founded a company that handles mergers and acquisitions. Today, we handle mergers and acquisitions in the sign industry in 18 different countries, including U.S. and Canada. You can do the things we need to do here, but we got to have the right leadership to do that. I want to challenge each of you to vote. I know some of you have other interests, but we need to vote, period. Whether you choose to vote in a Democratic primary and vote for Mike Winton, or choose to vote in a Republican primary, you need to vote and elect the candidates we need to have serving. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winton. First question will go back to Alice Demetrian. In the 109th General Assembly, the Tennessee State Senate only had 7 Democrats in the entire membership. If you win the primary and were to win in November, how do you feel you would be able to function in a Senate where you are steeply outnumbered on the other side of the aisle?
Well, I've had a lot of training in dealing with problem solving, and I'm hoping that we all want to do what's best for Tennessee. So I feel that I would be able to talk to the people on the other side and try and find a common goal, a common ground, and I would definitely be working towards getting what my voters tell me they want and need done with the Republican side. We need to do more talking with each other as opposed to name calling or just giving up and tabling. A lot of things get tabled, and we need to stop tabling and start making decisions.
All right, Mr. Winton.
Want to remind our audience on the radio, you are listening to candidates on the Democratic side for the state Senate in the 16th District. Mr. Winton, in the 109th General Assembly, the Tennessee State Senate only had 7 Democrats in the entire membership. If you win the primary and were to win in November, how do you feel you would be able to function in the Senate where you are steeply outnumbered on the other side of the aisle?
Even if we take 3 or 4 seats, and I speak as a candidate for the Democratic Party, even if you take 3 or 4 seats away, the supermajority is there because of their actions and because of what they've done as a party. If we're able to do that, they have to recognize that enough people in the state want different kind of leadership there. They're going to be more willing to work with us to create dialogue, to create the things that we need to pass the legislature that's important to citizens, not just to the party. And I think that's one of the things I bring to the table in negotiating contracts, even with people in other countries, even with people in Canada. When you're negotiating contracts, it can't be all about me. It can't be all about them. It's got to be a joint venture. So I've already actually created some dialogue with seated senators, seated House of Representatives, that if I'm in office, I want to be able to communicate. The worst thing we can do is go toe-to-toe and do nothing. Sometimes it may not be the right answer to be a Democrat. Sometimes it may not be right to be a Republican. But when we do it for you, we know it's right.
All right, thank you. That was Mike Winton. You'll lead off the second question as well, Mr. Winton. Back to you. What is your stance on legalizing marijuana at the state level, both recreationally and medicinally?
I have a special needs grandson, and doctors have spoken about the use of that, and just recently legislation has been passed to use cannabis oil. And my grandson's had seizures ever since he was a baby. And from lack of oxygen when he goes through that, his mental capacity is not what it should be. He's always been in special ed classes, and his equivalent's probably about a 5th or 6th grade. You know, medical marijuana, don't be confused when they use that term and just say marijuana. What's the difference in a medical prescription? If a doctor sees fit that it could benefit a child or adult, would it be worth doing that? I would never prescribe that you could just buy marijuana anywhere on the street or anywhere in a store. But if it was prescribed and used in the medical field, I would support it 100%.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winton. Alice Demetri, same question. What's your stance on legalizing marijuana at the state level, both recreationally and for medical purposes?
For medical purposes, it's been proven to help many different situations, so I'm definitely for that. As for recreational use, our jails right now are so crowded with people who have been arrested for maybe small amounts. I would not be totally opposed. We could then maybe regulate it better, make some tax money off of it, take some people out of jails. It would have to be polled, and I'd want to see what the people in the state really wanted, but I'm not totally opposed to it, given more information and to see what kind of regulation we could possibly do for it.
Alice, just go ahead, remain standing
Okay.
there. I'll go ahead and bring it back to you since we just have the 2 candidates. Okay, the next question. It has been well documented that many in the Republican Party have fought against refugee resettlement in the state of Tennessee. Do you think that it should be the state's decision? What are your thoughts on refugee resettlement, and how do you think that should be best handled?
Well, it's hard to fight against the federal mandates, and I do feel that the refugee situation is scary for a lot of people. But if they were vetted very well and deciding where they went and how they came in, I do feel should be a state decision. But we can't just be afraid just because of where they're coming from. We need to look at the humanity situation and what can we do to help and be morally responsible for everyone, not just people we maybe agree with totally in religion or other avenues. So I do feel the state should have a lot to say about who we accept, but I also feel we shouldn't just totally out of hand not accept people just because of where they're coming from. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Mike Winton is next. Same question. It has been well documented that many in the Republican Party have fought against refugee resettlement in the state of Tennessee. Do you think that should be a state's decision? And what are your thoughts on refugee resettlement, and how do you think that should be best handled?
It's really tough to decide because, you know, when you get into federal mandates and federal restrictions, they certainly have a program for refugees to come to our country. I guess if you look back on the history of our country, we're all kind of refugees in a sense. One thing I've always been taught, I do mission work overseas, and one thing that I've always been taught in doing that is we never want to change their culture. I don't know if I were asked my opinion, I would probably like to see refugees sent to the nearest environment that meets their environment today. I think it's easier for a person that may live in South Middle Tennessee to accommodate somebody in Alabama, where it wouldn't be somebody that you could accommodate in Washington, if that makes Washington State, if that makes sense. The other problem that we're having right now, and why it's such an issue, is the overflooding of it. The other problem, it's combined with illegal immigration. So we're not going to getting influx from refugees, but we're also getting influx from refugees that may not be a true refugee. And we're not watching the people that are coming in. I'm always about helping our neighbor. Our country is designed to help our neighbor. It's our Christian moral standard that we live by. But we have to be careful of who we allow to come in. We have to watch and guide that. So I believe the state should, in essence, have that final say-so, but through federal monies, those people have the right to come here and us to protect them.
Mr. Wayne, you'll get the final question. I think everyone can agree that there is a need for discussion and change related to racial tensions in this country. How do you think the government, national and or state, should work to find resolution? And how much do you think really depends on individual communities pursuing change?
It's so hard. You know, in growing up in the last 60 years, our country, I think, has stepped back recently in racial tensions. It's sometimes hard to even imagine when you're watching the television or watching the news at how people can think. One thing that I'm certain of, that the moral issues and the racial issues of our country, I don't ever believe will be cured by government. Our moral issues are going to be cured in our heart. They're going to be nurtured in our homes. If we're not willing to take that conviction and nurture that morality issue in our home, then teach it and preach it in our churches or synagogues, and then transfer that into the world, government's not going to be able to do that for you. Man is always going to fail you. Man is always going to be that one evident factor that's not going to stand up. But if you create that conviction in your heart and then you multiply it, that's when it's going to get better. As long as we're always looking for the government to do something, that's never going to happen. Okay?
Thank you. That was Mike Winton. Back to Ms. Demetria. Same question.
Actually, this is something I've kind of been thinking about lately more because of my law enforcement background. And one thing I think would help would be if we would mandate psychological testing of police officers before they're even allowed to put on a uniform. And then once they have that, we need to reevaluate them every 5 years. People don't understand. You get a total different mindset after spending 5 years in law enforcement. And you do start changing, and we need to keep an eye on some of the officers for that reason. In addition, they need to have yearly diversity training and conflict resolution training. I think if we would make that mandatory throughout the country, because right now I've worked in 6 different law enforcement agencies from state through county, and everyone's different as to what is required to become a police officer. Every yearly thing, I mean, we have yearly firearms and yearly protecting yourself, but nothing is mandated on diversity training. So I really think that would be a big step. And in that same venue, I think it wouldn't hurt to also start doing some diversity training in our schools, maybe starting, as early as 6th grade, and then in high school a little bit more. But we need to help the kids see, especially some of our schools are not very diverse. So they need to be taught and help understood that we don't all look the same, we don't all feel and think the same, but we can still all work together, and we are still all human, and we all still have the same types of hopes and dreams. So I think education and training are the 2 things we really need to start helping people learn to work together and not always be looking at the way a person looks on the outside, but work together. That's my thoughts on it, education and training.
All right, Alice Demetrian, go ahead and remain up there. We've got 1 minute for closing comments, and then we'll take a quick break. 1 minute for Alice Demetrian.
I forgot about the closing comments. Yes, a vote for me is a vote for years of experience in dealing with difficult people. Not to say Republicans are all difficult, but I also know how to listen to both sides and try and find a good common ground that we can all work together. I really strongly feel we need to work on the health insurance issue, and I really feel we need to do more about getting things actually done and passed. I was totally flabbergasted that the committee that found Mr. Durham guilty of abusing women, over 22 women, decided they could just not do anything, that to hold a conference to oust him wouldn't be any good because after November it wouldn't matter. And to me that just blows my mind. So I really want to let you all know you need to get out there, vote your heart, but vote. We need some people in there that are willing to do something, not table things, not waste their time on things like state guns and state books, but deal with important issues that matter to the people of Tennessee. Thank you.
Mr. Winton?
When I first started considering a run for state senate, almost everybody says, "What's your platform?" And months ago, I started compiling. When you see one of my palm cards, you're going to see the issues on the back of the card. Well, those issues aren't my issues. Those issues came from you, the people. That's why it's my platform, because if I'm your state senator, I'm going to serve you. I'm not going to serve me. I'm not going to serve a party, and I'm not going to serve a donor. I'm going to serve you. Everything that you see on my card is needed situations that need our attention and our help. Mike Winton will go and fight that fight. My granddaddy always said, "Boy, if you're going to build a fence, build it where pig tight, bull strong, and horse high." When you go to work, you go to work. You give them a good day's work. My mama told me if I got elected and I did anything wrong, she's coming down there and whoop me. So I've already got 2 people watching me. And I would love to be your state senator. My baby sister says to win with Winton. I'm going to ask you folks to do one more thing before we leave. Yesterday evening, last night, there was a terrible tragedy in Tullahoma. I'd like for us to just spend just a moment of silence in reverence for the Moon family in that occasion. And again, thank you for being here, okay?
Thank you.